I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on August 8th, 2014. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches to share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room available right below the main video edit, just down below. If it's not there, there's some instructions on what to do to maybe get it. Log in and join us for the conversation. If you're listening to the recorded version, and many of you will, or if you have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, we'd love to have you send us an email. The right email for that is coaching@gallup.com, and the contact page, or there's some information on the contact page right there on the live page as well at coaching.gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center. That is just gallupstrengthcenter.com, all one word, for all your coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video in both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening. And if you've been waiting for RSS feeds, they're coming like 2 weeks. I think I'll have them for you. Those are all available over at coaching.gallup.com. We'd love to have you join us for live tweeting as well. Hashtag CSF Chat will get you Clifton Strengths Finder Chat. Oh, just CSF Chat on Twitter. And make sure you follow at Strengths Finder on Twitter while you're out there. Jeremy Petrosini is our host today. Jeremy, it's great to see you. He works as an advanced learning and development consultant here with Gallup on the riverfront with me. Jeremy, great to see you. Thanks for coming out for another Call to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, great to be here. It's, as you said, kind of fun to be broadcasting live here from the Omaha riverfront. But yeah, always exciting to reconnect. Again, for those of you that may be new to Call to Coach, every 2 weeks we try to relaunch a new story where you get to hear from a coach who's out there in the world, again, trying to make a difference, leveraging strengths to really unleash potential within people. And the Clifton Strength Finder, as many of you know, has really transformed the lives of millions of people. We've had over 10 million people that have completed strengths, but it's, again, part of our goal and our mission at Gallup is to really unleash over 1 billion people who would discover their strengths. And in efforts to do that, we want to continue to empower and come alongside 1 million coaches that would really kind of just see their mission aligned with ours to want to help people discover their passion. So one of those coaches we have with us today is Keith Baldwin. Keith, excited you're here. And coming in from Anchorage, Alaska, beautiful Anchorage. And Keith has spent over 26 years of his career in the insurance industry. Great personal success, and kind of then leveraged that, even his kind of internal role, began to mentor others, coach others, came along the Gallup Strength Finder tool, kind of saw the way that it really helped him personally and others to maximize their own potential, but has then to launch his own coaching consulting practice to really come alongside small business owners, insurance agents, to build strong, engaged teams that maximize productivity. And so, Keith, we're excited that you're here with us today. I'm excited for people to hear a little bit about your story and just, again, your journey in really feeling called to coach. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, of course, I want to start out with my top 5 because I think that's the tradition.
Yeah, great.
Exactly, yeah. So harmony, learner, intellection, input, and maximizer. And it's interesting, I shared a bit of my story with you before, how these came into play before I even had the language to describe them. And like one of my earlier careers with a big insurance company was negotiating claims. And when I had what I like to call my midlife meltdown, where I was miserable in my career, really hating my job, I started to go through this like reinvention process. And part of that was I just identified this purpose that I wanted to make a positive difference in the lives of others. And when I started using that, as a framework for how I interacted with sometimes very angry people, I actually became much more effective than what I was when I tried to negotiate from a different lens, so to speak. And then when I started reading, like the original Strengths Finder book and Strengths 2.0, and took the assessment, saw that harmony is my number 1. It's like, oh,
wait a minute, yeah.
So I have that, initial piece of me that I don't like conflict, but once I'm in the middle of conflict, I'm actually pretty good at getting to consensus and So it's interesting how before I even had the language that these themes were just part of who I was.
Yeah. Hey, quick note on that too, because I think harmony is one of those themes that sometimes people think doesn't mean you completely avoid conflict, just kind of tuck tail and run, and it doesn't, right? It means that you want to see resolve. We've been using in one of the 34 theme videos on the Gallup Strength Center website. The individual that we have talking about harmony is talking about being a divorce attorney.
Yeah.
And actually talks about how it's an ideal role for him because it's all about resolution. It's all about there's conflict here. We need to resolve it as quickly as possible. So
yeah,
great insights about yourself. And again, strengths helping you figure more of that out. But yeah, keep going.
Well, it's interesting with harmony, which is I lead from that. But if I'm at a restaurant and I don't particularly enjoy the food, and I say something, my wife says, "Well, let's send it back," and I'm like, "Nah, it's not that big of a deal," because I don't. The stakes aren't high enough.
Yeah.
But in the context of like now coaching, where sometimes I tell people things very directly because they need to hear how what they're doing may be impacting their team. I'm actually, it's part of what I do and it's not a problem, but there has to be a reason for me to step into the conflict.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, and tell us a little bit about that evolution then from kind of some of that self-discovery. I know this happened again back when you're working within insurance, but tell us a little bit about your opportunities to then use strengths not just for your own insight, but where you began to use it with others and even kind of inspire that dream of now where you're at today with owning your own consulting coaching practice.
Yeah, it's Maximizer is number 5 for me.
Okay.
And so part of that process was I started to look at how can I help other people who are miserable in their career and help them find, some purpose or at least find some sort of joy and satisfaction right where they're at.
Yep.
So I started some like brown bag lunch groups and really totally informal training type programs and just went deeper and deeper into it and eventually led to a master's in education focused on mentoring and how do you create really inspiring climates. Like I love the term intrinsic motivation, the whole idea around motivation. How do you create that? How do you create climates where people can naturally thrive? And for me now, strengths is just the foundation of everything I do with the insurance agents and other business owners I work with, because I'm seeing that really people's motivation really comes from being able to be in environments where their strengths thrive. I think strengths-based selling even talks about that, or maybe it's now discover your strengths. But so that maximizer piece of me really is looking at how to pull that best out of people. And in fact, I always say I think one of my gifts is I can see the gifts in others, and then I sometimes almost want their success than they do because I know that what's possible for them, and so I'm trying to pull that out.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like again, for coaches out there, as they're coaching individuals who have maximizer high, that ability to kind of see the potential, like to see it and want to pull it out. I think that's so much of what made Don Clifton so passionate about strengths and wanting to see 1 million, and now we're at 10, and then someday 1 billion plus, right? But it's like everybody has potential. How do we get into it? And what's interesting, I think some people might look at what you said earlier as helping others who are miserable in their career as a niche, like, oh, that's a niche market. Yep, I know some people like that. But the reality in what Gallup continues to find in our data is only 17% of workers, and this is U.S. specific, but 17% of workers in the U.S. Would agree that they have the opportunity to do what they do best every day.
Yeah.
So even if we rounded that up to 20%, right, we're saying 2 in 10 love what they do every day, but there's another 8 in 10, and maybe not all 8 would say they're miserable. But I, as a maximizer as well, I would push back to say, have you settled? Have you settled for, hey, this is paying the bills, and so what,
Right.
And where you, in part of your story of coming alongside individuals and saying you can experience more. It'll be better for you. It'll be better for the customers you serve, better for your family. There's such a great message there of leveraging strengths, again, kind of based on your own story, but just like you just said, to help people who are miserable to really move into their sweet spot.
Yeah. And I'm seeing clients start to adopt the same philosophy. And what I like about working with like insurance agents that may have a team of 5 or 6 people, that some of them are also trying to find, like, why do I do this? Besides helping clients, and certainly I want to have a successful business, but there's some of them, even if they don't have Maximizer, that they love the idea of how they can positively impact their team.
Mm-hmm.
With the idea that even if the team members leave, they take this strength knowledge with them to whatever they do for the rest of their life. And so it kind of gives the agent like a renewed sense of purpose of doing positive things for those they work with.
Yeah, yeah. There really is a pay it forward element to. It's not just about the individual you help, but the way they then embed it with their team or their culture. I'd love to hear more. And I know when you and I had the chance to just kind of connect a little bit prior to today's call, so much of the impact of strengths and as a coach is not just somebody taking Strength Finder, they now have their top 5, they have a conversation and say
Right.
thanks, moving on with life. But it's about the transformation that brings, either to their personal life, obviously to their profession from a productivity standpoint. And I know you had the opportunity, you mentioned, working with people in insurance or even people specifically in a sales role. For a lot of people in sales, it's feast or famine, right? It's if I'm not selling, I'm not seeing an income. And so I'd love for you to share some stories with us of individuals, so some of your clients that you've been able to coach, where strengths has really helped them just kind of to not only gain deeper understanding of themselves, but to really drive their own individual success and performance.
Yeah. So one of the earlier agents I coached, because of course I guess 2013 was the first year that Gallup offered this, right? For outside coaches, and so I went in April. And so one of the a client that I had right around that time took the strength assessment. His top 5 were positivity, woo, strategic, learner, and futuristic. And he was actually doing pretty well as an agent. He was pretty successful already. But he knew, and I love working with people like that. He said, I know my team is capable of so much more.
Mm-hmm.
He said that there's something that I'm not doing. I know that they're capable of so much more. And so that's an awesome person to work with, right?
Yep.
And but he was having a hard time like clarifying expectations and holding people accountable for doing some of the things that would take to get success. But as we worked through his strengths, and then we had his team take the strength assessment as well, what really started happening for him, first futuristic really started kicking in, and then of course positivity, he really leads with that. But he started painting this inspiring vision for his team about what was possible for them, and once he started to really buy into that, then we really started developing some concrete plans, pulling from the strength of the team, but actually became very strategic about how they would achieve their outcomes. So he started with the positivity and futuristic to get him to really kind of buy into I think his own strategic thinking,
Sure.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then once that all kicked in, and it's like he tied all 3 of those themes together, and he's been in business I think about 9 years, and January was his best month ever, and May beat that. And what I've really noticed when I go into their office just to visit now, there's like this frenetic positive energy. Like everybody is so excited and focused, really, really busy. But it's interesting, I've seen people be really, really busy and unhappy and think, oh, I work too much.
Yep.
My work's too hard, I got too much on my plate. And I've seen people very, very busy with a ton on their plate go, this is awesome, we got all these things going on. And he's managed to create that sort of energy in his office.
Were there key things that when he came back and shared that story with you, or again, I love that you're even saying you walk into the office and you feel it, right? We do a lot of work at the Ritz-Carlton, and one of our senior consultants will say he can walk into a Ritz and already predict where their customer engagement numbers are going to be, just based on what he feels from those employees. All of them are a certain level of excellence, but he can tell the ones that really excel and the ones that are struggling. So there is something tangible, I think, that you feel.
Yeah.
What were the keys that he maybe came back to, and it might even be specific to what you were saying about him maybe tapping into that futuristic and positivity that were there, but were there ways that he felt like he's now expressing them differently, that now his team feels it and they express it? I'd love to hear just kind of other nuggets that he was able to take that and then apply it in regards to what are some of the practical things he did to create that environment.
So a lot of it was really pulling from that strategic piece, and they really drilled down the outcomes they wanted to achieve for the year, all the way down to daily activities, and then developed, and that's probably his strategic, I'm guessing, that really made the difference. And then started having some weekly meetings around expectations and accountability. Although there really were weekly success meetings. It's probably a nicer term than expectations and accountability, since those two words get kind of a bad rap sometimes. But so he became very strategic about what do we need to perform on every day, every hour, in order to get the results we want in a month. And that seems to be one of the really key things that he did. One of the things he said is that I held his feet to the fire, and it really was just me holding his own strategic plan up to him.
Yep.
And talking and helping him really believe in his that this was really the right focus for his team and for what he wanted to do, to believe in his own strategic thinking, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, we talk a lot about in the training and a lot of our resources, even with strength-based leadership, kind of the whole idea of complementary partners. And I think sometimes when you've got leaders like that have some real strong strategic thinking themes, they have big ideas or they have strategy, but again, maybe do they wrestle with how do we implement it, or do I need that accountability like he was asking for you? The other piece, that I hear a lot when I'm coaching executives with futuristic high is that sense of do they forget that what they see in their head, everybody else doesn't see? And they may go, well, I shared it with them back in January. I told everybody where we want to go this year or the next 5 years. And I love, like, whatever you call the weekly meetings, right? It's like, how do we recognize people, but see those as kind of successes on the journey toward that vision. And it sounds like in helping him create that strategy, he's continued to tell people, like, hey, here's where we're going, here's how we're getting there, and the proof's in the pudding, right? Like where you said this is their best month ever, and on their way to be their most successful year. A lot of it is kind of pulling it from inside the person and now sharing it with the team. So, no, that's great.
And I think that futuristic theme really helped for him to develop a belief in what was possible, because at first I think he felt uncomfortable because they already were pretty successful. And
right.
So he's thinking, like, well, how can I ask them to do even more? Like, they're doing good.
And I don't want to screw it up too, right?
Yeah, exactly. But once he really painted that picture, and then your point about really that you can't over communicate, I think is pretty profound as well.
Yeah. I'd love to hear too. I mean, you're well versed in Gallup's research around employee engagement. That even decades ago, when we began to look at and partner with large Fortune 1000 companies who said, "Hey, we do an employee survey. We ask hundreds of questions, and we're worse off afterwards." Right? We asked people if they like what they got paid. They said no. What do we do? I mean, Gallup's research helped us really look at what makes teams great, teams most engaged. We found those 12 core elements that we initially published in First Break All the Rules in the book 12. I know you've begun to integrate that, and we call that instrument the Q12, but you've begun to integrate that with some of the teams that you work with. One of those items even is, have I received recognition and praise in the last 7 days? So that weekly kind of, do we embed that in who we are, how we interact is so important. Share with people out there. I know some of our coaches are really intrigued with not only sharing strengths with the organizations they work with, but again, strengths as a driver to engagement. Strengths is a way to say to people, hey, if we focus on our strengths, if we understand them, we can see it improve the opportunity to do what we do best and drive engagement. I'd love to hear just kind of some stories with that, or ways that you've been able to leverage engagement in your practice as well.
Yeah, so one of the, I'll lead into the strengths thing, but a question that I started asking agents early on, based upon reading like the 12 elements of great managers and break all the rules, some of those. So I was just curious, and so I'd ask agents, if I went out and interviewed each one of your 10 team members, and was to ask them what are the top 3 things that your supervisor expects from you every day, would I get the same answer from each person? And I've yet to have any agent say, oh yeah, they tell you exactly the same thing, which really speaks to me about that expectations aren't clear, which of course is the foundational question in the Q12. And so I found that over and over again. And so probably one of the more important things I do is, one, really help the agents or the manager realize how important that question is. And then unpack the expectations from the process. Um, and just that idea that first the expectations and end results that you want need to be clear. Kind of paint that picture over and over and over again, make that very clear, very explicit, but then work with each person. I love the Gallup phrase that the very best managers manage each person differently.
Yes. Yep.
And so then to work with the agents then to think about their employees' themes and not let go of the expectations. And that's one of the things I think they have a hard time thinking about is that, the strengths, just let them do what they want. It says, no, it's the whole cool thing about the strengths is that we're focused on outcomes. So never let go of the expectations, but then how do we talk to each person individually from their strengths and help them be the best they can be towards meeting those expectations.
Yeah, that component too, and I know you mentioned that you've been able to listen to catch some of our webcasts that we do with interviewing managers that we call the Great Manager, but so many of those components, like you said, where managers can individualize what does this person need, and I love, like you're saying too, like are people clear on their expectations or not? I actually had one CEO of a company say to me, Jeremy, I didn't need Gallup to tell me it's good to recognize my people. He's like, but it was good to measure it twice a year to figure out, am I doing it or not? It's
right.
like I could tell you I spend enough time with my kids, but if you ask my kids, they may give you a different story. So it's that
right.
pulse check to listen, but then actually be able to do something with it and individualize that to your team members, which is so much, again, is I think what organizations are asking you for, some of the listeners out there for, is as a coach, give me that advice. What can I do to be a better leader, but to foster an environment where my team members are engaged, and especially where it's high performing, like this example you were talking about. Does it feel like one more thing I'm asking them to do? The answer is no. It's actually a more efficient way to do it. So share with us too just some tips and tricks. I know that's been one of the helpful elements of these webcasts that coaches will often say, as I'm thinking about, gone through some of the Gallup training courses or bought some of the Gallup kits, but hearing kind of best practices that coaches have kind of come across over the years that just kind of we add into our arsenal as coaches. But I'd love to hear from you, some best practices, I guess, that you've been able to really incorporate in your coaching conversations.
One of the best responses, and this comes from a coaching instructor at through IPEC that I was part of. He used to say that the best response to somebody that pushes back is great, and so about 85% of the people that I work with a strength assessment or have them take it, they love it. I mean, they go, this is me. I mean, I maybe didn't like the questions because I didn't have enough time or whatever, but this is me. But every now and then I'll get somebody that really, they start off like not really believing it.
Yep.
Or they'll read it and they'll say, well, this sentence isn't, that's not me. And my response is always, great. Tell me about a day that at work or maybe even a social situation that you just thrived, that you just had an awesome day. And then I'll ask them, tell me about a day that you couldn't wait for to be over. And then I just ask them some questions about, why do you think that is? And then pretty soon we go, well, is there, there may not be, and I'm not saying there is, but maybe, do you see any relationship between what's on this assessment and what you went through? And I've yet to have anybody push back on that. They'll go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, now it makes sense. So if I can tie it to their reality, I think sometimes that helps those that push back. And again, I rarely have to do that because most people just buy into it.
Yeah, but you're right, and I love the fact that you shared it because it is a piece that almost every coach I've talked to at some point will come across somebody that says, I don't believe it, I don't like it, I'm going to take it again, or whatever it is that their issue is, or I like these four, but I'm not sure about this one. Sometimes, and then we talk about this a lot in our training, sometimes as coaches then we just want to give them the answer. Well, but Gallup found retest reliability is over, 0.72, and but I love your response to that tip of great. Like tell me why, but letting them almost kind of either debunk it themselves or kind of begin to win themselves over. I've heard that a lot with input. We hear that where people are like, there's a line in there about collecting stuff, and it sounds like the TV show Hoarders, and that's not me. We go, all right, well, tell me about that. Do you collect anything? Oh, ideas. I think you and I were even talking about that. Why
Right.
the blue screen behind you, keeps all your all the books from, years of things you've collected to say, hey, it's not necessarily, sometimes it's about the stuff, but sometimes it's about the ideas and the other components. But letting the person share that versus us as the coach just trying to, fill in the blank for them. I love kind of that great and using it as a positive to build momentum. So.
Yeah. Another tip I want to share, which actually you've shared before, but I just have to say I just love the thermostat on the wall concept, because it helps people, I think, start to think through about how to be very purposeful about how they use the strengths. And so you've talked before about that if you walk into a room it's too hot, you go up and you turn down the thermostat a little bit, or if it's too cold, you turn it back up. And it kind of reminds me of, Stephen Covey used to talk about, the paradigm or the lenses we see the world through, and that, the question is, do they control us or do they influence us? And what I love about using strengths, both for myself personally and also with clients, is the idea that I can think about, so these influence me, so how do I aim this influence towards productive outcomes? And I think the thermostat on the wall example that you use really helps. It makes it very concrete and easy for people to kind of understand that this isn't just not, oh, this is cool, this is me. This is like, how do I actually use these in a way that's most effective? And at times, maybe I should turn this theme down a little bit and pull from a different theme or two, and somebody with futuristic could spend all their time just thinking about the future and not actually get anything done. And so maybe every now and then you got to turn that down and try to pull from something else to go into action.
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, even just reiterating that both for self and using that with your clients, I think what we at Gallup really love about this kind of team army, tribe of external coaches aligning, from a how do we impact the world standpoint, is somebody can take the strengths assessment and gain some self-awareness, but what do they do with it? And I think that's the piece of saying, just because you're now aware and go, sorry guys, I'm just a dreamer, or sorry, I don't have any responsibility. We can, if there's just awareness, we can either just still, it can get in our way, or we use it as an excuse for what's not there. And this whole idea again of once you're self-aware, it does let you be attentive to self-expression. How do you express that futuristic? How do you express that includer? But the self-regulation piece is what you're talking about. Don't just apologize, hey, I'm high communication, so I talk too much, right? But say, ask self, am I talking too much? Turn it down a little bit.
Right.
Maybe pull out my learner and go, tell me about yourself, and Keith, tell me about you. Not only is it good best practices on a first date, right? It's also helpful with coaching. So, no, that's great. Jim, I know it sounds like the chat's been some good questions out there, good dialogue. I'd love to hear if you've got any questions for Keith that have popped up so far.
Yeah, you bet, Keith. And let me take you back a little bit to the earlier part of the conversation. One of the questions from Stephen, he says, what was the first large or slash small leap that you took to move from your earlier job when you realized you weren't fully fulfilled to lead you to where you are today, where you're now focused on helping others? He's at that point. He says he's at that point right now. And there's actually a lot of agreement in the chat room. There are a couple others who said they were. Yeah. What was that point for you?
Well, probably Maximizer probably led it for me. For me, it was I had some good opportunities to be part of mentoring committees and to mentor and coach other people and to do some training, but it wasn't enough. And so although I was, I guess you could say, well, I think like you mentioned, kind of satisfied, I was not fulfilled and want to do more of this. So I started thinking through the process of going from a really good corporate job to starting a business that, I'm a realist. I know that it takes a while to build a business. And I got really analytical about it, probably input, I suppose, and learner. And finally, I just realized that there's really no way of totally predicting the success of a coaching business. And so I just made the leap and made the decision to start a business. And so it was kind of a process of thinking through it. But for me, it was probably a lot led by Maximizer. But then I really quickly, in the year before I left, went kind of input and learner crazy by joining masterminds and going to courses and getting certified as a coach, and um, so it really was more of a transition than just all of a sudden one moment. It's just I knew I wanted to do more than what I was able to do in the position I was in.
So for you, it was just a matter of kind of just cutting bait, right? At that point, just at some point in time, you kind of had to say, okay, I'm doing this. It wasn't
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't clear, a little bit risky, kind of like okay, here we go. It was would that be a true statement?
Yes, totally, totally. Like there would have been some financial benefits to stay. I left my company at 55. It would have been financially better as far as like retirement and pension programs to wait till 62. But 7 years of life is worth a lot to me, and 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 I knew that I had something that would allow me to make a bigger impact than what I could make where I was at, and so it really was just making a decision that I have to go. And luckily, I have a wife that was very supportive, and she said, "Let's go." So
Yeah, very good. I've done that myself. I came home one day and just told my wife, I'm done with that job, and she was
yeah,
like, "You did what?" And so I recommend you with your spouse that you talk about that before you make that leap. But that's a good point. Couple
Activator,
more.
Jim. Where's Activator for you?
Activator's 5. Yeah.
yeah. You see,
Very-
activator for me is a lesser strength as well as achiever. Those are all lesser strengths, and my wife is in top 5. She has activator and achiever. So when I said, I really think I want to make this bigger impact, I mean, she's like, well, we'll quit tomorrow then. Let's just go.
She was the one for my wife. Belief is very high,
Uh-huh.
and so she's got some things set out the way they were, the way they're going to be.
Right.
And I kind of destroyed that whole, the whole plan and the process. And so
Yeah.
it's a little opposite there for us. A couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
Baha asks, in the group that you were referencing earlier in the conversation, the group that you said that you just talked about, were there any individuals that didn't fit in, and what happened to them?
There was one person that just decided they did not want to be in that type of environment, and ended up leaving. And actually, the production in the office went up with less people, which was very interesting. But yeah, so one person decided that this, real focus on strengths, pulling out the best from each person, but but not letting go of expectations. I mean, certainly this agent did a great job of getting reasonable expectations pulled from each person and really talked it through and had great buy-in. But yeah, so one person decided they were kind of used to maybe, I don't know if coasting is the right word, but not really, they weren't fully engaged, and this agent wanted fully engaged people on his team, basically. I mean, that was the bottom line.
Yeah, I do, and I'd say I do think it's tough when you engage a team and you measure the engagement and you get them really engaged. If
Yeah.
it's more obvious than when one person or two people are not engaged than
Yeah.
than it was before, right?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
becomes painfully obvious
Yeah.
to them sometimes, and like you mentioned, losing one off the team in a situation like that, and where the team engagement then goes up. So it's not necessarily a bad end result. It's probably better that person moves on to doing something they're more engaged in than trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
hold everybody on the team. Would you say that's true in what you've seen?
Oh, totally. I read, I think it was this book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. They use this term, give people their freedom, because sometimes it's hard for people to leave a position. They have a job, and it's kind of scary out there. But keeping somebody in a job that they're not a good fit for and that they don't like is not doing that person a favor. But a lot of people I work with are super nice people, and so they feel bad about holding people to those expectations, but they're really not doing them a favor, in my belief, by keeping them in a position that's not a good fit for them.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good advice. It's hard as a manager.
It
That's
is.
really hard.
It
That's
is.
some of the hardest stuff that we do. Walt asks this question. He says, Keith mentioned discovering his purpose during his mid-career meltdown. I'd like to hear more about how he sees purpose and strengths interacting.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating question. I think they are very very related, because as I said, the purpose that I identified for myself was to make a positive difference in the lives of other people, and maximizer is number 5 for me. And so I think that approaching from a strengths perspective, that I think that it directly aligns with both looking at where do I want to make my impact. I think is directly impacted by our strengths, because Some people I work with that may really lead with like execution or strategic. Um, they really focus on their goal. Like they like seeing the numbers, and I have a couple people that have competition near the top 5, and so like their purpose is I really want to be the top salesperson, and to be the top and to help my company be number 3 in the region or whatever. And so I think there is a direct relationship. For me, it was a lot of writing and contemplating. But so I identify my purpose first, and that had strengths later. But if I was doing it now, I would start with strengths and think about, how do I see the world, and think through, my top 5 to 10 strengths, and then think about, so where would these show up in my life? Where have they shown up, and how do I want them to show up more? And I think I would use them more purposeful than what, I did the approach I used originally.
Yeah, we had Rebecca Parks on Called to Coach India, the Indian version of that, just a couple of weeks ago, and she likes to pull out those values cards that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you? And in this case, does values equal purpose? In your opinion, is that can you get at purpose? Maybe people are struggling. What's my purpose? Can you get at purpose through values?
I think they're a piece of the puzzle. Like I don't. I'm not a big believer that there is a like flick a light switch and all of a sudden we just go, oh, there's my purpose. Like my first purpose statement was 3 pages long. It was awesome, but I couldn't remember anything on it. And so I don't know. I think it's all a piece of the puzzle. I think strengths are a huge piece of the puzzle. I think values, what we value in life and the impacts we want to make, are an important piece. I use values with value, like exercise with all of my clients. But I think that it's like a puzzle that's ever evolving. And that once we identify that purpose, then we live it. And it's kind of like, in adult learning theory, they talk about experiential learning, where we have an experience and we start, we learn some knowledge, we apply it, and then we kind of process, we think, and we reflect, and then we kind of fine tune things. So what I'd encourage people to do that are trying to find that purpose is to just start, and don't worry so much about having the perfect purpose statement. Just start. Think about, identify values, think through those strengths, maybe even look at, if you get, I really encourage everybody to get their full 34, but look at the ones at the bottom, and that may help you see that those are things I don't value so much, or that approach I don't value so much. But yeah, I think it's a process more than a instantaneous thing.
Jeremy, can you take a quick second as we mentioned those value cards that we do? Can you talk just a little bit about how we use those in the training?
Yeah, I think, and I like the way you frame it up, Keith, that values are a part of who we are. And they're different for each individual. I think the individuals you're coaching, part of it, and there's a lot of different variations of it out there, but just whether you sort through what's most meaningful to you. Is it family, success, what are the different things, your faith? I mean, all those different elements are, what do I value, what do I hold up? And part of it, when you know what's important to somebody, and you look at that along with their dominant themes, whether it's their top 5 or their top 10, you can kind of see where they're finding tension in their place of business or in their current job. If somebody's really passionate about mission, but they're in working for an organization that doesn't have a lot of mission behind it, where they've always wanted to be. You hear them say something like, "I've always wanted to be a school teacher, but It's that other piece that somehow they've kind of given up on that dream, and where you can even then lead it back to this sense of purpose. So those cards, again, Jim, I think just help the clients you're working with do some self-discovery. And what do you value? What do you hold up? And listening to how that then plays out in the decisions they make. And I do think, almost even back to whether you're coaching someone who's in a job change, whether you're one of those coaches, on the call that we're kind of nodding and wanting to hear, Keith's approach to how he made his own career transition. I do think there's an element of, as you go through that process of self-discovery, it's not a turn on the light switch or, I bought the parachute book and now I have the answers. I think those are all part of components to the journey. But strengths really comes back to that lens of, if this is how I'm hardwired, does this new job, right? Play with the new job before you even get there. Would this new job allow me to do what I do best every day? And I think just asking yourself that simple question can go, all right, if I'm high woo and this new job is going to put me in an office by myself all day, you go, that's not going to do it for me, right? It doesn't necessarily need me to be a sales job, but it's a job where I need to have the opportunity to interact with other people. A teaser to an upcoming show for those of you out there who want to learn more about purpose as well. We've got a guest coming on this fall. Roy Spence is his name. Started an ad agency that was wildly successful 45 years ago. He started it 45 years ago, but it continues to be successful. Does ad campaigns for Southwest Airlines and a whole bunch of great organizations. But Roy has started an organization called the Purpose Institute, and it basically exists to help both companies and individuals say, what is your purpose and how do you do that? What's really cool is Roy's become a huge fan of Gallup, because he said, if I were to summarize the purpose of life for all 7 billion people on the planet, he says it this way: the purpose of life is to play to your strengths.
Yeah.
So it kind of resonates with those of us out there who are coaches. Is, again, it's not I took StrengthsFinder, now I know, but now that you know those themes, it can lead you down that path. So,
Jeremy, as we bring this in for a landing, Keith, it always goes so fast when we go through this, and some great stories. But Jeremy, as we come in for a landing, anything else you want to add?
I'd love one last nugget, Keith, I guess, for you to just share with people, and then we can dive into this more in the post show too. But that push off the ledge piece, that where you talked about even kind of the value of your wife kind of being a collaborative partner there to give you the courage to say let's go, right, or the validation to say let's go. You mentioned too, like you do a lot of coaching with individuals who are in sales. That wasn't necessarily your niche, but obviously with running your own coaching, consulting business, you've got to be able to sell. So what's one little tip or nugget, and again, we can dive into it more in post-show, but what's one tip or nugget that you leverage early on to find that first client, second client, third client, knowing you're not a hardwired salesperson, but sales is part of this, the success of your business?
So kind of going back to the idea about separating outcomes from process. I mean, there are certain things to be successful in sales and to grow the business that have to be done. And so some of those, I hired a virtual assistant to make cold calls, because Woo is at the bottom for me, and and she loves doing it and is awesome at it. And so part of it is things that needed to be done in my mind based upon my plan. I put off somebody else. And then the other part really was looking at, like I do a fair amount of networking. I enjoy public speaking, but I tried my first year in networking to just go to big networking things and meet lots of people, and I hated it. And so
knowing you're low woo, right? You're just like, I'm just going to tough it out, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I did.
Suck it up.
I was in California, went to my hotel room, checked emails during the networking events. So, and my wife, of course, is going, we flew all the way down here. But when I look, I have a relator is I think 6 or 7, and I am good, and I do enjoy going into deeper conversations. And so now when I go to networking events, I look for outliers, so other people that look like they're a bit uncomfortable, and I go introduce myself to them. And oftentimes I coach. They don't know they're being coached, but I'll ask them some questions, and I coach, because I find it's very comfortable to go deeper into the relationship and to have a role. And because, again, I'm trying to help others, because I lead with Maximizer. It's number 5 for me anyway. And so I think that the big thing for me was to think about, what are the things I need to do to have success growing the business, and then which are those that I want to have somebody else do, and then how can I use my own strengths to get the same outcomes, using a little different approach.
Yeah, no, and I love that element too of, I guess, even learning the hard way, right? You go, I just got to suck it up and network. You do have to network, but what you figured out is playing to your strengths, right? Find those outliers. There's plenty of CEOs, decision makers who are at those same events and do not want to network any more than you do, but they'd love to have a conversation. Yeah. Right. So playing to your strengths. I love that that's turned into business, and then when they're loving what they're doing, they're referring you to other people. So awesome. Jim, let me tease out our next show. Again, I mentioned kind of Roy Spence coming up here this fall. 2 weeks from today, the 22nd of August, we're going to be back with Call to Coach. We're adjusting the time a little bit, but it was important to get this guest on. Dr. Sangeeta Bottle from Gallup, who is our lead researcher behind the research on our Entrepreneurial Strength Finder. She's also the co-author to our Entrepreneurial Strength Finder book that's coming out September 9th. You can pre-order that on Amazon today, but September 9th will be the launch date of that. So Sangeeta is going to be joining us just to talk about the research behind the Entrepreneurial Strength Finder, how it's both different but similar to Strength Finder, and ways that you can use that, and just kind of some of the exciting things we know about entrepreneurs. So should be an exciting call again on the 22nd of the month.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of great guests coming up in the month of September. Exciting to see the list that's coming up. You had mentioned Roy, but Jim Harder will also be on, the Great Manager, as well as Sangeeta. So if you want to know all the events that are going on, just head over to our event site. That's just gallup.eventbrite.com, and you get a list. We keep that about 30 days out, and you can get registered for all those. And really, you're registering for the reminder. So everybody needs to be reminded to show up to these things. And like Jeremy said, from time to time, we have to change the times of them. So you just might want to get out there and get that done. I want to remind you to take advantage of all our resources that are available through the Gallup-Strengths Center. And a great site to do that, Gallup-StrengthsCenter.com. Send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger, or you have a meetup going on. We haven't talked about meetups as much as we should. The fall will renew our meetup vigor. As we do that, give everybody the summer off, but in the fall we'll talk more about meetups. They're all currently listed on the meetups tab out at the coach's site, so coaching.gallup.com. By the way, brand new coaching site coming in a couple weeks, so we're excited about that as well. You can send us questions, coaching@gallup.com, and again, don't forget to visit all the links you'll need are our coach's site, coaching.gallup.com. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, stay around for the post show. You only get the post show if you come out for the live show, and so we'd love to have you do that. Stay around. With that, we'll say goodbye, everyone.